Your Excellencies, Your Excellencies, welcome to the United Nations annual SDG moment in this decade of action. I'm Priyanka Chopra Jonas, and I'm so pleased and proud to be a part of the United Nations family as a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador. We meet today at a critical point at our world, at a time when global solidarity is more important than ever, as countries continue to struggle from the devastating effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, as the climate crisis upends lives and livelihoods, as conflicts rage, and as poverty, displacement, hunger, and inequalities destroy the very foundation of the more just world that we have fought for such a long time. And as we all know, all is not well with our world. But these crises did not happen by chance, but they can be fixed with a plan. We have that plan. The UN Sustainable Development Goals, a to-do list for the world. These goals were created hand in hand with people around the world in 2015. Together, we have an extraordinary opportunity to change the world that we live in. We owe it to our people. We owe it to our planet. We all deserve a just, safe, and healthy world to live in. The present and the future rest in your hands, in our hands. But time is running out. We are nearly halfway to the 2030 deadline to achieve these goals. In the Secretary General's own words, we don't have a moment to lose. In this room are representatives of the very countries who signed up those goals in 2015. Leaders who can make that plan a reality in partnership with all of us. So today is about action, it's about ambition, but it is also about hope. It is about what we must do together to make the SDGs a reality. So Your Excellencies and friends, it is now my great honor to introduce the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres.
Excellencies, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by expressing my deep sadness on the recent loss of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, whose funeral took place today. The world bids farewell to an extraordinary leader and a lifetime of service. It is service and action for humanity that brings us together today. Excellencies, we meet at a moment of great peril for our world. Conflicts and climate catastrophe, mistrust and division, poverty, inequality and discrimination, rising costs of food and energy, unemployment and declining incomes, massive displacement and dislocation, and the ongoing effects of a global pandemic. Lack of access to finance for developing countries to recover, a crisis not seen in a generation. Each peril is pushing the Sustainable Development Goals further out of reach. And in the face of such perils, it is tempting to put our long-term development priorities to one side, to leave them for a sunny day. But development cannot wait. The education of our children cannot wait. Dignified jobs cannot wait. Full equality for women and girls cannot wait. Comprehensive health care, meaningful climate action, biodiversity protection, these cannot be left for tomorrow. Across all of these areas, young people and future generations are demanding action. We cannot let them down. This is a definitive moment. All of you here today and those tuning in from around the world give me immense hope that we can put our hands on the wheel of progress and steer a new course. That we can rescue the Sustainable Development Goals and get back on track to building the better world that leaves no one behind. The world has a long to-do list. We need finance and investment from the public and private sectors. We need a reformed financial architecture that benefits developing countries, providing critical financing and debt relief. This is the only sustainable pathway to address the obscene inequalities that exist in every country while ensuring that the world doesn't slide into a recession. Governments need to invest like never before in the health, education, and well-being of all people, including refugees and migrants. We need expanded universal social protection to protect people against economic shocks while boosting job creation, especially in the digital, care, and green economies. The Global Accelerator on Jobs and Social Protection for Just Transitions is one critical opportunity to reach these goals. We must all do more to lift up women and girls in every walk of life. And we need to save our planet, which is quite literally on fire. This means addressing the triple planetary crises of climate breakdown, biodiversity loss, and pollution. It means supporting the global biodiversity framework to transform how we use and preserve our natural gifts for the future. And it means moving away from our suicidal dependence on fossil fuels and jump-starting the renewable energy transition in every country, and supporting developing countries as they make this shift and adapt to the changes around them. Above all, there can be no sustainable future without peace. By embracing peace and tolerance, and more importantly, by living these values every day, we can move one step closer to the sustainable, equal, and just world that every person deserves. Chers amis,
distinguished friends, our task is tremendous, and young people demand that we take action, not just for ourselves, but also for future generations. If we are united, humanity will surmount all perils. Let us get to work. Let us place the world on the right track. I thank you.
Please welcome the President of the 77th Session of the United Nations General Assembly, His Excellency, Mr. Chaba Koroshi.
Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, dear friends, the SDG moment was created to be a yearly wake-up call.
In diplomatic language, a call and a reminder for all of us to remember what we need to do, and especially what we need to do to transform the vision of Agenda 2030 and the SDGs into a reality. Or in simple terms, it is high time for us to seriously consider the state of the world, taking into account all of the consequences, whether we like them or not.
It is timely and more necessary than ever to rededicate ourselves to the SDGs. Let me tell you why. First, because our transformative vision remains true and sound. عندما وضعنا أهداف التنمية المستدامة
When
توحيد جميع الأطراف
when we can bring together all stakeholders across the world to agree on a comprehensive framework of work in solidarity for change.
We also managed to bring the global South and North together for a historic agreement embraced by consensus. Ever since, scientific evidence has proven that we were right with our diagnosis and with therapy offered. Yet by most markers, we are failing our goals. I accept that we had COVID-19 sweeping over the world. The pandemic was a postcard from a future, a bleak future of interlocking global crises, one that we want to avoid and that we can avoid. We must now regain the speed lost to the pandemic and to our inaction. Solutions are at hand.
On our timetable and schedule for sustainable development, for the forthcoming year, there are important events planned, important conferences on climate change, biodiversity, on water, and on the reduction of the risk of natural disasters.
Key transitions need to happen. Just to name a few, a transition to renewable, carbon-free energy base and to green, inclusive, and circular economies where food systems must also be transformed. We should also renew our multilateral commitment to establishing a science support mechanism. It can assist member states in their effort by means of providing transparent scientific indicators and validation for sustainable development. Likewise, we must make progress on understanding the value of GDP and capitalize on the political momentum to go beyond it. We cannot neglect the critical issue of financing in our discussions. That is why the high-level meeting on financing for development will take place at the same time as the SDG Summit. Last but not least, we must look at the linkage between climate change and water holistically. Part of the solution we need to scale up is the action plan of the water and climate leaders. It is my hope that the UN 2023 Water Conference and the preparatory meeting I will hold on October 25th will spur major advances towards the implementation of SDG 6. Excellencies, we need initiatives from the civil society, the voice and passion of the youth, the support of the private sector, but most importantly, you, the member states, to deliver on promises made. The 17 global goals are the to-do list. They must be the to-do list of all leaders in this room. We are the people who can get this, the to-do list of the world, done. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nomza Mombata. I'm a Goodwill Ambassador for the United Nations Refugee Agency. I advocate for the most marginalized human beings who continue to show hope, resilience, and the ability to overcome. In recent years, we have seen unprecedented global crisis, that continue to take a toll on millions of people everywhere. The COVID pandemic, climate crisis, conflicts, and other interlinked and cascading emergencies have threatened the very survival of humanity, and of course, the promise of the Sustainable Development Goals. Business as usual simply does not work anymore. And as we move forward, we have to make sure that no one is left behind. It is time to come together and check off the world's to-do list. It's time to be bold, to double down on our ambitions and actions to create a better, more peaceful, and prosperous future for everyone. To do that, we must look closely at the world today, especially where the gaps and the opportunities are. But most importantly, we must lift the lid of invisibility. So let's now take stock of the state of our world with a compelling film with the support of our collaborators, Deloitte. Thank you. Eight years left to end poverty and hunger, to halve global emissions. It didn't start out as planned. We're not moving in the right direction. Years of progress lost in the pandemic. Escalating conflicts, climate breakdown. So where are we now? For decades, we successfully fought poverty. Now it's on the rise again. 1 out of 10 suffer from hunger, more people than ever forced out of their homes. Climate disasters increasing. Droughts alone estimated to displace 700 million people by 2030. This year, CO2 emissions hit a new record. At this rate, annual emissions will be 14% higher in 2030. Meanwhile, fossil energy receives $700 billion in subsidies from governments.
Your government.
Safe water and sanitation not made accessible fast enough. Progress must quadruple to cover all people by 2030. Women are held back at all levels. At this pace, by 2030, 825 million children won't have secondary level education. Human rights, health, and equality all hurt in the wake of war and disaster. Disrupted economies, food and energy crisis, and galloping costs of living damage global solidarity. Everything interconnected. Everyone intertwined. Business as usual won't cut it. Even though we made progress before, going back to pre-pandemic ways is not enough. We need a new paradigm built on the pillars of our 17 goals. Rethink conventions, flip the orthodoxies. Governments, organizations, corporations, citizens of the world, snap out of it. It's time for bold climate action. To act for women and girls, for social justice and inclusion. Scale up the transition to renewable energy. Create 85 million green jobs. Phase out fossil fuel subsidies and tax carbon. $2.8 trillion. Keep your promises. Support developing nations. Write off debts. Free up $1 trillion for climate resilience, people, and communities. $500 billion for Africa to achieve universal energy access by 2030. Commit to a circular economy now. New, resilient food systems. They can cut waste by 17%. Strengthen domestic financial institutions. Make insurance and banking accessible to everyone. Scale up the digital transformation to educate the 1.6 billion kids who missed school in the pandemic. Educate girls, including the 130 million not in school now. Ensure women's equal share of decision-making. Eliminate discrimination against female workers and boost productivity by 40%. We cannot afford to leave anyone behind. We have a to-do list. We have the resources. 8 years to reach our goals. We're on this planet together, so let's work together. Let's get the list done.
Your Excellencies all, please permit me at the outset of this morning's SDG moment to extend yet again our deepest sympathy to the people of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth on the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. But as we speak this morning, in this moment, I ask us to ask ourselves who is needed on this journey. Heads of state, heads of government, yes. Ministers and ministries of finance, yes. But above all else, the individual citizens of this world. And that is why the United Nations has sought to ask us to remember the to-do list. Because in each of our lives every day, we make commitments about things that we must complete to make our lives better. And so we are asked today to do the same in this world, which is at a critical juncture in the affairs of man. We have seen, regrettably, a world that has reminded us that there is no right to life, that there is no right to success, that there is no right to ensuring that there can be prosperity. And regrettably, in seeing that, we have failed to lay the foundations that will allow us to continue to see the people who become the victims of hunger, to feel the people who become the victims of no education, to appreciate that a world that is driven by a climate crisis cannot provide a sustainable future for us. Are we so arrogant as to believe that there will be no failed societies and no extinct species, when the history shows us otherwise? I ask us this morning to let us speak to the citizens of the world. Let us speak to the citizens of the world, the boys and girls who we want in this battle to remind their leaders, to remind their parents, to remind their head teachers, to remind each other that they are necessary to join the army to fight against poverty. The first goal, end poverty. The second goal, to make sure that people can eat and that we end hunger. The third goal, to make sure that we can deliver good health for all. The fourth, to provide quality education so that people can think for themselves and lay a platform on which they can build for themselves. The fifth, to achieve gender equality so that whether it is a boy or a girl, or whatever gender you assume, that you have the right to live in this world without fear of discrimination and with opportunities equal to all others. And the staff of life, water, to ensure that there's water for all. How can that be something that the global community doesn't fight for? Or clean energy, because we have seen just now in the video what an abundant reliance on fossil fuels and an industrial revolution has done for us. And yes, for people of color, we say that we are now the victims of double jeopardy because our blood, sweat, and tears brought about the industrial revolution. And for too many of us now, we are on the front line of the climate crisis. And how do we get through when we speak to you as young people? We ask you to go for education. This assembly will speak today about the importance of transforming education so that you can be the best that you can be. But that is ultimately so that you can support yourself. Because freedom is about choice. And to have that choice, you need jobs. And that's what the to-do list at number 8 tells us. To support also those jobs, we need sustainable infrastructure. And we need to be innovative in this world where technology is moving at the rapid rate at which it is moving. And in all these things, as His Excellency Emperor Haile Selassie stood here and said, we need to fight inequality. If not, there shall be war. We need also to make sure that the environment within which we live, particularly in cities, when people come in their millions and their thousands and their hundreds to cities, that the cities can provide life for them because their actions and living is sustainable. And every day we use things. And you, more than anyone else, as children, can lead the world in a waste-free world, in a world that recognizes that if we take the plastics and we take the things that we just use and throw away, that they have to go somewhere. But you, the children, can lead the revolution to changing our habits. And if you change those habits, then the to-do list of protecting the oceans and protecting life on land becomes a little easier. But we can't do that unless we also tackle the climate crisis. And those who must be on the front line must be those who expect to be living 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now, 50 years from now. My friends, and if we can do all of that, and if we can ensure fairness by ensuring that we can end conflict and we can end corruption, and we can tell the world that we don't want only to talk about the ending of conflict in the Ukraine. We want conflict ended in Tigray. We want conflict ended in Syria. We want conflict ended wherever it raises its head in the world. We want also conflict ended when it appears to be under the guise of criminality, like it is in Haiti. We want you, my friends, the children of this world, to hold us, the governments, accountable, and to recognize that we do have choice, and leaders can make decisions, and leaders are not constrained in the decisions that we make, and that everything does not depend on financing, although it is absolutely critical. And we will fight for financing, as I will speak later this week about, for the reform of the international financial architecture. But even without that, there are things that you and I can do. And we ask you, the children of this world, to hold our feet to the fire and make this world a better place to live in. Thank you.
Excellencies and friends, good morning. My name is Sherwin Bryce-Pease. It is widely acknowledged that women have been amongst the worst affected by the economic impacts of COVID-19 and the current global cost of living crisis. Existing inequalities have been exacerbated and women have been pushed out of the labor force and into poverty and extreme poverty at higher rates than men across the globe. What has been less visible is a focus on investment in women as a solution. In this SDG moment, we are starting this SDG 10 Reducing Inequalities dialogue that we hope will spark shifts in perception and accelerate action. Joining us today are Rebecca Greenspan, the Secretary General of the UN Conference on Trade and Development, who has been co-leading the work stream on financing for the Global Crisis Response Group. Agnes Kalibata, the President of AGRA, Sustainably Growing Africa's Food Systems, and who was the Secretary General's Special Envoy for the 2021 Food Systems Summit. Melinda French Gates, philanthropist, global advocate for women and girls, and the co-chair of the Gates Foundation and founder of Pivotal Ventures. I have to take my seat in 3 seconds. There are now decades of evidence highlighting that investing in women, removing barriers to labor force participation, and closing gender gaps in the economy has direct translation to positive macroeconomic outcomes. Projection models highlight that simply achieving parity in the labor force would unlock trillions for global GDP and accelerate economic growth, just achieving parity. These impacts are significant across the board, but particularly where inequalities are the greatest. Rebecca, in response to the triple food crisis, energy and finance, the UN Secretary General established a global crisis response group to provide evidence, analysis, and policy recommendations. What are some of the urgent actions the international community can take as we grapple and face this emergency?
Thank you very much. Let me first say that as the Secretary General, we are challenged by cascading crises. But cascading crisis is also cascading inequalities. And women and girls are the hardest hit when this happens. And so we have to know that we have a health crisis that is not over, that we have a climate crisis that is getting worse, and we have a debt crisis that is in the horizon. 60% of low-income countries and 30% of middle-income countries are in debt distress. So that is what we need to tackle. And on top of that, we have a cost of living crisis. Prices of food, of energy are as high as they can be. So what do we have to do? Today, we have a cost of living crisis that is a crisis of affordability. So we need prices to come down, and we need liquidity to go up. For tomorrow, the crisis of affordability can become a crisis of availability. Without enough fertilizers, next year's harvest will be unable to feed the world. So we need enough liquidity for social protection for all, precisely to avoid this socioeconomic crisis, and we need to make fertilizers available for the world, especially for the small farmers. So just to finish, we need to bring prices down, but we need also financial availability for the liquidity of countries to go up, for their fiscal space to widen, so countries can get social protection for their poor and vulnerable.
All right, we'll come back to you in a second, Rebecca. Last year's UN Food Systems Summit was truly a watershed moment. Agnes, The world was working to make food systems more resilient, and suddenly we were faced with a global food crisis, right? Almost prescient that you had that summit last year. From fertilizer to inflation, what have we learned that we can take to scale in countries, particularly through the leadership of women?
Thank you. I guess one of the biggest lessons coming from the Food Systems Summit is the fact that these crises are not going anywhere. So we saw the COVID crisis immediately, followed by the crisis we just talked about. But let's step back and remember that in Africa, for example, women, farmers, and farmers in general were living through crises one after the other, whether it is the droughts that started back in 2012, whether it is the fall armyworm and all these other things, the pests that they have to deal with every day. So what the Food Systems Summit did for us was to bring people together, to bring context from different parts of the world together and give us a chance to look at some of the challenges that people that are living on the edges of food system working with, and the opportunity to actually give us a chance to prioritize, to start prioritizing on how to deal with vulnerabilities in our system. So if you look at most of the countries that stepped forward, the number one thing that they were trying to address is vulnerabilities in the food system. The number two thing they were trying to address is the challenge and question of jobs in the food system. So for example, the African continent stepped forward with a common position, and if African countries implemented that common position, we wouldn't then have a challenge around jobs and around vulnerability, because that was the number one thing that they talked about. Even here in the US, the government put forward vulnerabilities and addressing the challenges of women as number one. So if countries could only take forward the 112 strategies that they put forward, that prioritize women, that prioritize youth, that prioritize vulnerabilities in our system that were put forward by COVID-19, the world would be a different place. Right. So my call is, let's go forward, implement those strategies that were put forward, but also private sector and civil society did step forward in a really interesting way. Everybody was determined to find action. So if we can only come from those actions.
Yeah, solutions are one issue, right? Implementation, of course, a completely other. Melinda, you have over the years been one of the fiercest proponents of the need to invest in women to build a better world for everyone and to accelerate sustainable and equitable economic growth. And you have actioned this yourself, investing millions of women in women entrepreneurs, in investors and leaders, literally putting her money where her mouth is. Can you tell us why investing in women is really the solution?
Well, we need to stop talking about empowering women. We need to just make sure women have power. And that means not—
Say it again.
Let's stop talking about empowering women and make sure they just have their power. So it's not just putting food on the table, it's making the decisions around that table. It's not just being a recipient of good government policy, it's sitting at the table when government policy is made. What we know is that women are force multipliers. When they have their full decision-making authority, they have their bodily autonomy, and they fully participate in society, everything gets better. We know from great research, their families are healthier, their children are in school, the families are wealthier. So we should want this as society, and yet it's always been this nice-to-do agenda. I grew up in a house where my mom said, make sure you set your own agenda or somebody else will. So our agenda is making sure women have their full power. So during COVID-19, we saw some fantastic programs, for instance, where cash was put into women's wallets, their digital wallets. It had a much bigger effect than if you just gave them cash, because the women had decision-making authority. Their husband or their father-in-law couldn't get to the money. We saw women in Uganda take the money, invest it in their businesses, and their businesses were 15% more profitable. We saw women in Niger go to the market and tell us they could go to the market because the assets were protected. So we need to make sure women have money to have power. Money is power. And when they have money, they unlock all kinds of other benefits for their families, their societies, and frankly, the global economy.
All right, second round, 90 seconds each, please. So many of us are feeling the effects of the cost of living crisis, right? Me, you, everybody. Rebecca, how do we create fiscal space for struggling countries so that we can help families avoid impossible choices like paying for food or paying for heat and get back on track to keeping the promise of these SDGs? 90 seconds.
Yeah, so we need the international financial institutions to really use their deep pockets to make liquidity available for the countries.
This is a big fight, right?
Yes, that's a big fight. But the instruments are there. We can use the instruments we have. The money is already there. They can use it to cushion the blow of what is happening. And we need the countries to have the social protection programs that will allow for women to have the cash, to have the money, and for the households to be able to face this crisis. They cannot face it alone. They have less possibility to cope today because of the cascading crisis, because we are after COVID-19. So countries and households have less possibility to cope alone today. And let me just say that precisely the SDGs is our main instrument to call for solidarity and cooperation. That's what we need today, solidarity and cooperation, and to support the Secretary General in his fight to bring more food and more fertilizers to the market to stabilize prices and be able to make it available for the people of the world.
And as you push for solidarity, we must acknowledge that sometimes consensus is very difficult to achieve in a room like this. Melinda, the issue of the care...
Difficult but not impossible.
Difficult but not impossible. Melinda, the issue of the care economy and unpaid and underpaid care really came to the surface during the COVID-19 pandemic, right? Recent figures show that school and daycare closures in 2020 led to an estimated 512 billion additional hours of unpaid childcare globally, not for men, but for women. Even before COVID-19, economists projected that we would lose trillions each year from the formal economy by not valuing the unpaid care work undertaken mainly by women. You advocated strongly for significant investments in care as part of the economic recovery plans. Can you explain the link between unpaid care and inequality and how investment in care could actually be a driver for sustainable and equitable economic growth and the steps needed to realize this?
The bottom line is we all care. We care deeply for our loved ones, for our children, for our aging parents. But who does the burden fall to of taking care of the young and the old? It is women. And it's the thing that we don't often talk about. It's both the loving care we want to do, but the many, many, many tasks. If we don't fix our care economy and the care burden that women have, they will never be able to have their full place in society. They won't be able to sit at the decision-making table. They won't be able to have the job they want. And it's not just in the formal sector. Informal sector too, women will tell you, I don't have anybody to leave my child with. How can I go run my market or my stand? So this is an issue for low income, middle income, and high income countries. And it's time we did something about it.
Agnes, we know that investing in women works. What will it take for women farmers, entrepreneurs, innovators to go to scale? And what kind of impact could they have on food security and food systems?
So what it will take is nothing that we haven't had before. They need a voice. Women already know what they want to do, and they're already practicing the things that can go to scale. But they're not in places where they can express themselves. The knowledge they have stays with them because it's not being tapped into. So let's give them voice, and let's allow ourselves to learn from what they are doing. Number two, they need to be seen. Women in different places of the world have different needs. So my mother's needs are extremely different from even the next village person's needs. So let's really focus on being able to draw out who these people are and be able to tap into their potential where they are. The last one is they need choices. And this cannot be more important than the agriculture sector, where the type of seed you grow is extremely important to the type of money you get, where the type of business you're able to run and the ability to attract financing is extremely important to how you run your business, or even the knowledge you have is extremely important to how you show up in business, or even the ability to have land is important to how you can go to the bank and get a loan. So I think if we did those three things and really ensured that we scale them across different societies and communities. Women can lead. Women are able to lead. Women are leaders. Someone told me the other day that if you want something said, tell it to a man. If you want something done, tell it to a woman.
So 2 immediate takeaways. Women need power and they need choices. To close, let me invite each of you to share one word you're feeling about the SDG to-do list. Just one word. Let's go down the panel. Rebecca first, Agnes, and then Melinda.
What we need.
One word for the SDG. When you think about SDGs and the to-do list associated with those SDGs, what's the one word that comes to mind?
Solidarity.
Solidarity, that's one.
Women empowerment. Empowerment, women empowerment.
2 words, but I'll let you pass on that. Empowerment.
Empowerment.
Melinda?
Hopeful.
Hopeful. And on that hopeful note, please join me in thanking these extraordinary women for being part of such an important conversation. Thank you to you all. Your Excellencies, friends, we've come to the end of our dialogue on solutions to end inequalities. We know that it is simply paramount to empower and support women as key drivers for sustainable and equitable economic growth. Now, let me leave you with this. By 2030, more than 150 million women and girls could emerge from poverty if governments implement a comprehensive strategy, including spending more on social protections, investments in the green economy, better infrastructure, and education. We hope that this dialogue has resonated deeply with the work people everywhere are doing to bring about change in their communities, in their countries, and across the globe. And let me end with a quote from Nelson Mandela. Freedom, be that political, economic, or social, cannot be achieved unless the women have been emancipated from all forms of oppression. I've never regarded women as in any way less competent than men.
Your Excellencies, friends, our next guest is an inspiring young woman who has moved many of us with her poems of hope, change, unity, and resilience. Please welcome poet, activist, and UNICEF supporter, Amanda Gorman.
UN Secretary General, distinguished guests, and all of humankind. How can I ask you to do good when we've barely withstood our greatest threats yet? The depths of death, despair, and disparity, atrocities across cities, towns, and countries, lives lost, climactic costs, exhausted, angered. We are endangered, not because of our numbers, but because of our numbness. We're strangers to one another's perils and pain, unaware that the welfare of the public and the planet share a name. Equality doesn't mean being the exact same, but enacting a vast aim, the good of the world to its highest capability. The wise believe that our people without power leaves our planet without possibility. Therefore, though poverty is a poor existence, complicity is a poorer excuse. We must go the distance, though this battle is hard and huge, though this fight we did not choose, for preserving the earth isn't a battle too big to win, but a blessing too large to lose. This is the most pressing truth, that our people have only one planet to call home, and our planet has only one people to call its own. We can either divide and be conquered by the few, or we can decide to conquer the future and say that today a new dawn rewrote. Say that as long as we have humanity, we will forever have hope. Together, we won't just be the generation that tries, but the generation that triumphs. Let us see a legacy where tomorrow is not driven by the human condition, but by our human conviction. And while hope alone can't save us now, with it, we can brave the now, because our hardest change hinges on our darkest challenges. Thus, may our crisis be our cry, our crossroad, the oldest ode we owe each other. We chime it for the climate, for our communities. We shall respect and protect every part of this planet, hand it to every heart on this earth until no one's worth is rendered by the race, gender, class, or identity they were born. This morn, let it be sworn that we are one human kin, grounded not just by the griefs we bear, but by the good we begin. To anyone out there, I only ask that you care before it's too late, that you live aware and awake, that you lead with love in hours of hate. I challenge you to heed this call. I dare you to shape our fate. Above all, I dare you to do good so that the world might be great. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, friends, a message from the Secretary General's SDG advocates, Black Pink.
Hi, this is Blackpink. This is the United Nations SDG moment. We're here today to bring you special attention to the Sustainable Development Goals.
We can't deny that the climate crisis is getting worse. There isn't a single moment to lose. That is why SDG 13 for climate action is so important. It can truly make or break our efforts across all global goals.
We must seize this moment and take actions to create a world that is more sustainable and leave no one behind. So what can we do?
첫째, 개인의 노력이 빚어낼 수 있는 효과를 과소평가하지 말아야 합니다. 우리는 탄소 발자국을 줄이고 에너지 소비를 줄이기 위해 지금보다 훨씬 더 많은 조치를 취할 수 있습니다. 예를 들어 식습관 같은 사소한 삶의 영역에서도 차이를 만들어낼 수 있는데 지역 농산물을 선택하고 음식물 쓰레기를 최소화하는 등의 작은 노력이 큰 변화를 만듭니다.
둘째, 소비 습관. 우리는 우리 생각보다 훨씬 더 큰 영향력을 가지고 있습니다. 소비를 통해 사회에 메시지를 던지고 원하는 것을 요구할 수 있으니까요. 현명한 소비를 위해 우리 함께 지속 가능한 상품들을 찾아볼까요? 그리고 무엇보다 기후변화에 대해 꾸준히 공부를 해야 합니다.
미래를 보호해야 할 책임이 우리 모두에게 있으니 배움과 지식을 통해 함께 더 나은 내일을 만들면 좋겠습니다.
All of us deserve a world abundant of nature, energy, and livelihood.
저희 블랙핑크는 이제 배우고 행동하는 여정을 시작했습니다. 저희와 계속 함께 해주시겠어요?
지금은 UN SDG moment입니다.
Let's take a moment to learn about our planet and what we can do to make it better.
Not enough time to miss me. Excellencies and friends, the Secretary General spoke about the various perils pushing the SDGs out of reach. Among them, the climate crisis presents possibly the greatest threat. Right now, climate impacts are taking a growing toll on people, prosperity, and our planet. The outlook ahead is precarious. As we learned from the Uniting in Science report, we are headed in the wrong direction on many key climate indicators. At the same time, we have vast opportunities ahead if we double down on climate action to supercharge progress right across the SDGs. To discuss the state of play on Goal 13, climate action, and the various pathways ahead, I'm joined by Simon Steele, the Executive Secretary of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and boy, do we need more steel in the game. Chido Mpemba, the Youth Envoy for the African Union, and Ingrid Ruimert, Senior Vice President at renewables company Ørsted. The Secretary General has said that grotesque greed is a key factor fueling the climate crisis, even as we see devastating losses from floods, fire, and drought. People and the climate can't seem to catch a break. Simon, you've taken up a role at what really is an inflection point, right? In this climate emergency, clear climate impacts are rapidly worsening, and yet there's growing evidence that climate action, particularly from governments, has stalled. We are 51 days away from COP27, a vital moment from the world. What does it need to deliver?
Thank you, Sharon. Two things, progress and direction. With only 8 COPs to go in this decisive decade of action, think about it. 8 COPs, that is the equivalent of 2 World Cup finals. That's 2 Olympic finals to go. So every COP is absolutely critical. And we know that progress will be made in each of those, but the question is, will it be sufficient progress? So every COP is a crucial COP. And the science is clear. If we continue doing what we're doing, we're going to fall off a cliff edge. The evidence is clear. You know, in every region, every country, we're seeing the impacts of climate change. Pakistan, the Sahel, across Europe, the US, the Pacific, the Caribbean, whether that's sea level rise, hurricanes, flood, fire. You know, that list goes on. So we're at this inflection point, this tipping point. So we know what needs to be done. We know we need to limit, cut emissions by half within this 8-year period. But the good news is that we've entered a new era in the climate discussions. The Paris Agreement is more or less negotiated. So this new era is shifting from negotiations to implementation. And what does that mean? It means getting stuff done. It's moving from how should we do it to this is how to do it and getting those things done, whether that's at a country level, whether that's companies, whether that's in our homes, every person. And we know the 4 negotiating tracks, the work tracks, whether that's mitigation, adaptation, finance, loss and damage. But we also need direction. And what COP27 has to demonstrate, recognizing the urgency of what needs to be done and the scale of the response that is required. Because this is impacting real people. Yeah. So there can be no backsliding as we leave that COP.
And as we spare a thought for Pakistan, let's also think about Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic right now, because Hurricane Fiona is barreling through those islands as we speak here. We have all witnessed young people on streets and online demanding credible and urgent climate actions from world leaders. Chido, you've spent the last 7 months traveling the African continent, meeting young Africans to help mobilize climate action. Can you tell us what you're hearing from young people about the solutions that they want to see now?
Thank you. I think what is standing out is that climate change is happening right now, and it's something that is very urgent, which is why we have a lot of young people in the forefront in this regard. I mean, when we consider that 7 out of 10 countries most vulnerable to climate change are in Africa, we realize that this mostly affects the young people as the largest demographic and the most vulnerable, who suffer from consequences of droughts, floods, and other extreme climate events. And some of the solutions that have been coming, this is based on sitting with young women, sitting with a group of youth refugees that have also been affected through, issues of climate mobility. And they're saying that we need youth as a main stakeholder. We need to bring them to the table in the decision-making spaces, and also in local community action national strategies, as well as global platforms. For youth and children that account for 40% of the global population, it means that we need to recognize that they're half of the number that we need on most of these platforms in order to provide the solutions for now and for tomorrow. In addition to this, we must have half of the emissions by 2030. We need to do it now. We do not have 8 years to act, but the action needs to actually start now. We need to act, and we need to start building resilience from now, but ensuring that we also incorporate the young people who make up the largest demographic in Africa.
And let's not forget it's an African COP this year, right, in Egypt. Ingrid, your work is focused on transforming not only how businesses operate, but also the entire energy system and the way in which it benefits all of society. We need a green, renewable revolution. Are you seeing one? What's holding back a faster transition?
Yeah, thank you, Sherwin. If you had asked me just a year ago, I would have said, no, I don't see a renewable revolution. But luckily, lately, political leaders have stepped up. The thing is, it's just not happening fast enough. My company at Ørsted, we developed the first offshore wind farm already 30 years ago. And 2 weeks ago, we commissioned the world's largest wind farm in the UK. So we have proven again and again over the last 3 decades that we can deliver clean, affordable energy on budget, on time, and it also with a positive impact on nature and on people. Because renewable energy actually delivers on most, if not all, the 17 SDGs. Clean and affordable energy for all, health and well-being through better air quality, life underwater, life on land. It spurs new industries, innovation, creates jobs, creates new skills, education, and I could go on. So the question is, of course, how do we then get the revolution going? And I would mention 2 things here today. First of all, we need to significantly speed up the build-out of renewables. Not in the next decade or next year, we have to start today. Governments need to speed up the allocation of land and of seabed. We need to speed up the permitting processes, which often take much longer than to build the actual wind farms. And we need to give developing economies capacity building, technology, and finance. And then secondly, we need to build it right. We should have our youth, our people, and our communities at the very heart of this revolution. Ensure that we create jobs, new skills, and we work with local supply chains. And we need to have a net positive approach to biodiversity. And only then, I think, the renewable revolution will sweep the world, and we will be able to create a world that runs entirely on green energy.
Yeah, and I think, the broader point there is that coal cannot achieve the SDGs anymore, right? Coal cannot do it. But the big question is this principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, the responsibilities that developed countries have to developing countries that are still so very reliant on coal for energy. Simon, there seems to be broad agreement that the climate crisis is a code red for humanity and that urgent and bold action is needed. Simon, in your career, you've worn many hats in government as well as the private sector, giving you a very unique perspective. What do you see as the key opportunities to drive progress for climate and all the SDGs?
Well, Thank you, Sharon. Stronger climate action will drive progress across virtually all of the SDGs. But starting with the negative, climate change is a threat multiplier, and it negatively impacts our performance in those SDGs, whether it's destabilizing the global economy, whether it is lost productivity, $2 trillion estimated as lost due to a warming planet by 2030, loss of jobs, more people in poverty. It creates a conflict for our resources. The impact on migrations, estimated that by 2030, 200 million people will be displaced due to climate change. But climate change also presents us with an opportunity if we take the right steps, and will be an enabler, can be an enabler in terms of that positive action, in terms of achieving the SDGs. Positive action in this area is a single greatest opportunity for us to build a safer, healthier, more resilient, more prosperous world. And this is not just for the present generation, it's for generations to come. So how do we achieve it? And it has to be for countries, companies, households, people, doing what we know needs to be done in terms of tackling this crisis. And if we get it right, things look bleak right now, but if we get it right, it's our best opportunity at achieving the SDGs.
Chida, what does resilience and adaptation mean to you and your peers? Why is it important, including dividends across other SDGs from investments in resilience and adaptation?
Okay. I think resilience is about protecting people and livelihoods from worsening climate impact and disasters. I mean, for young people, particularly in developing countries, it's about having a realistic chance to realize their full potential without declimated by climate impacts. Adaptation and resilience, for example, is also entailing us having to strengthen the anticipatory actions and increasing investments which are human-centered. We need to put the young people at the center too. I mean, many people rely on agriculture, for example, for their livelihoods, and this sector relies on predictable weather patterns. And Africa is expected to feed 2.2 billion people, including 1 billion youth, by 2050. And this means that we need to increase those investments to ensure that we are adequate when it comes to food production for now and for the future.
Ingrid, the final question goes to you. We know that the private sector has an oversized role to play in preventing climate change and is in many ways moving faster than governments are. Ingrid, last week we saw the founder of Patagonia give away his entire $3 billion company to groups and entities that are fighting climate change. Is this the tip of the proverbial melting iceberg? How do we speed up climate action and accountability and encourage more billionaires to give away their money to us?
Yes, surely the action from Patagonia, I think, is one of the strongest expressions of walk the talk that I have seen so far. Because let's be honest, it took all too long for the private sector to get to the table. And our youth had to take the streets and ask for climate action to wake us all up. But now, of course, a large part of the private sector is at the table, which is good because we can develop new technologies, accelerate, scale, create jobs, educate, in short, be this catalyst for change. And I do see many signs of credible climate action and companies coming together, working across industries, such as the Steel Zero initiative, to take an example. But three things need to happen. First of all, companies have to set targets and they have to be validated. And I would encourage all major companies to work with the Science Based Targets initiative. Last year, my company, Ørsted, was the first energy company to have approved a net zero target long term. And it's not only the direct emissions that count, it is the entire supply chain, upstream and downstream. And that's why it's important to extend the target to the entire supply chain, like we have done with a 100% renewable electricity target. because accountability is crucial. We need to push for targets, standards, and reporting. And secondly, we need to act, because long-term targets mean nothing without immediate action. And luckily, we experience a huge appetite for clean energy from some of the largest companies in this world. And of course, government should work with the private sector and ask companies to document, deliver, and disclose. And then finally, sustainability needs to be at the core of every CEO's agenda, to do well by doing good. And concepts like scope 1, 2, and 3 should be household language in every boardroom. And in the end, climate action is not only about technology, it's really about leadership.
So very quickly to close, each of you need to give me one word that comes to mind when you think of the SDG to-do list. Simon, we'll start with you.
Momentum.
Momentum. Cheeto.
Youthful.
Youthful. Ingrid.
Energized.
Momentum, youthful, energized. Why don't you get energized and thank our panel for their contributions today. Thank you all. A daunting set of challenges, as we heard today, but also an incredible opportunity ahead to supercharge progress across the SDGs and bring them closer to within reach. If we choose much bolder climate action, and boy, don't we need that in buckets. Thank you sincerely to our panelists, much food for thought and much fodder for action.
Your Excellencies, friends, I hope you've been as inspired as I have listening to people who are driving true change in their countries, in their communities, and across the world. As Her Excellency PM Motley so rightly just said, we ask you, the children of the world, to hold our feet to the fire. You heard it here. People everywhere are leading by example. Leaders making bold policy choices, young climate activists raising their voices, entrepreneurs scaling solutions, and humanitarians working tirelessly every single day to help people in need. Now, while there are so many challenges facing us around the world, there's also so much inspiration and hope. As you just heard young activist Amanda Gorman just say, I dare you to do good so that the world might be great. What needs to happen has been vividly illustrated. We have the commitments, the resources, the tools, and the plan to change all that is destructive, disrespectful, and dangerous. What we need now is ambition and action to turn those commitments into a reality. Today, we remind the world of its historic responsibility and promise to deliver the Sustainable Development Goals, the world's to-do list. We've been inspired by the breathtaking projections created by Expo 2020 that you have been surrounded by. Now, in front of you, you will see an SDG board as well, and I implore that you take this back with you and let it serve as a daily reminder of the important commitment that we have made. When we leave this room, we must leave determined to work every single day to advance the goals so that we can return in a year's time a lot more closer to achieving them. Now we should take inspiration from singer-songwriter Judith Hill, who will be performing Bob Dylan's legendary song, Blowing in the Wind, to a short new film made for today. But before I pass it on to Judith, I would like to say, as you listen and as we watch, we need to resolve together to get the world's to-do list done. Thank you so much.
must a man walk down before you can call him a man? How many seas does a white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? How many times must the cannonballs fly before they're forever banned? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. How many years must a mountain exist before it is washed in the sea? How many years can some people exist before they were allowed to be free? And how many times does a man turn his head and pretend that he just doesn't see? Oh, the answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. How many times can a man look up before he can see the sky? And how many ears can one man have before he can hear the people cry? And how many days does it take till he knows that too many people have died? Oh, the answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Ooh. Hey, the answer is blowing in the wind. The time has come. Today's a new day. Oh, the time has come. The answer is blowing in the wind.
Your Excellencies, friends, a message from the Prime Minister of Canada and co-chair of the Secretary-General's SDG Advocates, His Excellency Justin Trudeau.
Hello everyone, bonjour à tous. It's great to be here with leaders in government, civil society and the private sector alongside my SDG Advocates Group co-chair, Prime Minister Motley. Mia, look forward to seeing you in a few days. This SDG moment and Richard Curtis's exhibition reminds us that our SDG goals aren't just a blueprint or a to-do list. They're an urgent call for action. 2030 isn't far away, and we need urgent collective action to move forward on our shared commitments. Comme vous le savez,
As you are aware, we have seen delays with respect to the many significant challenges which are of concern to us. For example, we consider the efforts to reduce poverty throughout the world.
Declining poverty rates. There are as many people living in poverty today as there were in 2015 when the 2030 Agenda was adopted. The truth is that everything from COVID to climate change to international conflict makes the solutions we need more complex and interconnected than ever. But that isn't a reason to lessen our ambition. It's a reason to accelerate our efforts towards reaching our sustainable development goals.
For this reason, Canada has invested $827 million in the agricultural and agricultural systems, and more specifically to facilitate climate action as well as resilience. This is also why in March we held a summit headed up, led by young people, during which we learned more about young displaced persons and sought to find solutions to promote their education. We've invested more than $5 billion to reduce pollution and to shore up climate resilience throughout the world. And we intend, in view of holding COP15 in December, to advance the question of biodiversity. Canada wishes to surmount these challenges and many others.
Long, and it might seem daunting, but by working together, I'm confident we'll make it shorter. So thank you for your partnership and your leadership.
I look forward to working with all of you over the months and years to come. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to an end of the SDG moment. This was a reality check, but also a call to action to deliver the promise of the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, we have the opportunity to do that right now as we commence the Transforming Education Summit. As Ms. Melinda Gates just said so eloquently, women don't need empowerment, they need power. Fighting for the rights of freedom of children, young people, especially girls, and ensuring their access to transformative power of education are at the heart of my work as a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador. I grew up in India, where access to education is a challenge for a lot of girls, as it is in many other parts of the world, where children desperately want to learn, but are challenged to do so. I strongly believe that education is the cornerstone of equality, social justice, social change, and democracy. It is the foundation that so many of the Sustainable Development Goals are built on. As Nelson Mandela once very famously said, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. It is time to transform the world. Thank you and good afternoon.
Nice segue into the education.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.